we will be free. For when the rising tide is turned in every London quarter, Parliament comes crashing down with Robert's Rules of Order.
Saturday, April the 25th.
Mm-hmm.
Or the Saturday 25th, whatever you want to call it. The vice president
Vice chair.
No, it says president.
I know, but I hate that.
Was presiding in the absence of the president.
Chair.
A motion was adopted that the president appoints a committee of 3.
Mm-hmm.
How was the committee named?
Okay.
The vice president acting as president appoints the committee.
Mm-hmm.
B, the motion should be postponed to a meeting at which the president is in attendance.
Mm-hmm.
C, the vice president should be appoint the committee with the approval of the assembly. Or D, the president appoints the committee.
B.
You sure?
It's either B or D. Mm-hmm.
It's D.
Yeah, but B would work. But see, B is right too, because it's assuming that the president's not there. So obviously, it has to wait till the president's
Well, it says
there.
the president's not there. It's absence of the president. Yeah.
Right. So it has to be postponed till the president is there. B is right. I'm sorry. B and D are the same thing. B just says is more particular about if the president's not there, it can't be appointed right then.
It doesn't say that he has to appoint him right then, though, in the question.
Yeah, but I'm sorry. I'm stubborn on this one. B is saying it has to wait
It
for the president.
just says the motion was adopted that the president appoints a committee of 3. It doesn't say when.
You
How is the committee named?
I knew that the vice chair couldn't do it. That was the point of the question. Was that the vice chair couldn't do it in the absence of the chair.
Which is why A is not correct.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. And C is not correct either because, with the proof of the assembly, because if that was the case, then the assembly would amend the motion to say that he does it.
Right.
Right. So
okay, I get, but
the motion says the president appoints, therefore the president appoints.
Right.
That's why it's D.
Well, that's why I was saying the same thing though.
Yeah.
Because I knew the president had to appoint.
Right. But it doesn't mean that. But it doesn't mean that the motion should be postponed because it was adopted anyway. So you have to motion to reconsider.
But you know what I was saying.
You're taking the impression that if the president wasn't there, he couldn't object to the motion in the first place.
Right, that it needs to wait for him because he's the only one who can appoint.
But what if he's the one who made the motion and wrote the motion in the first place?
But debate can change your mind.
But couldn't make the meeting.
Debate can change your mind.
Because all right, 495.
All right. The ultimate point being that that's not a duty that the vice chair assumes in the absence.
Correct.
Because we had a big whole hoo-ha on that.
Correct.
That's why I remembered it.
495, 18 to 20. Section starts up at 11 called Appointment by the Chair. This is under committees, folks. Mm-hmm. In the absence of special conditions, appointment of committees by the chair or by the regular presiding officer is usually the best method in large assemblies, and it is the ordinary procedure in many smaller societies as well. The president cannot assume such power, however, unless it is given to him by the bylaws or by action of the assembly in the individual case. When the bylaws provide that the president shall appoint all committees, this power does not transfer to the chair if someone else presides.
Okay, so president is important here.
Yeah, they're equating president as in the person who is in charge of everything versus the chair as the person running the meeting.
So if it's... But this, it switches here. If you go on to line 11... it's talking about the chair, and then all of a sudden it switches to the president.
Well, look what it says. Appointment of committees by the chair or by the regular presiding officer.
Right.
So, see, this is one of the fundamental problems of Roberts is they have this wonderful jumping back and forth between president and chair, and they don't really define who's doing what.
So what my question is... if it's the chair and not the president that appoints a committee, can the vice chair appoint the committee in the chair's absence, because that's really only specifically talking about a president.
Well, see, that goes into an interesting thing, because it depends on how your bylaws are worded, because the bylaws have to authorize that the chair can appoint those committees.
Yeah, but say the bylaws do that, but the bylaws also say that the chair is the chief presiding officer or whatever, and we all know that in the absence of the chair, the vice chair does that.
If it's explicitly stated that way.
No, even if it's not explicitly stated. Someone's got to run the...
Yeah, but at the same time, that doesn't... Just because the vice chair may take over running the meeting does not mean they have as a presiding officer, does not mean they have the same duties as the chair outside of the meeting.
You don't think they become the spokesperson and all that if the chair's not around?
There has to be specific verbiage in there that they assume the role of the chair when there's a vacancy, or if the chair is unable to carry out the duties.
So.
Oh, yes.
Well,
because we had a major question mark about that in El Paso County.
Well, then who does it if it's not?
When the question was, is the vice chair the acting chair, or do they actually take over as chair upon the chairship
But acting chair is what I'm talking about. Acting chair would take the duties of the chair in the absence of the chair.
But we had to explicitly say that they were the acting chair.
Chair assume. It's right here. So 395, 451 through 452.
395, huh? Let's go look there first. That's about debate. It's 395. Vice president is on 452. Okay, if it is necessary for the president to vacate the chair during a meeting, or if the president is absent, the chair is occupied temporarily by another, who must also not be precluded from presiding by any of the impediments mentioned in the preceding paragraph, as follows. 1. A vice president. If the president, for any reason, vacates the chair or is absent, the vice president or first vice president normally should take the chair, unless he also, because of involvement in debate or for any other reason, should disqualify himself for presiding in the particular case. And if the first vice president is absent, must disqualify himself. The duty of presiding devolves on the other vice presidents in that order, which we don't have that. For this reason, the bylaws should number the vice presidencies if there are more than one, and persons should be elected to specific positions. It should be noted, however, that the bylaws provide for a president-elect. They usually provide that also the president-elect shall precede the first president.
This is only talking about presiding, though. It's not talking about any other duties.
Chair appointed pro tem. Okay.
It's just talking about presiding, and I think we all agree on that.
Yeah, we do agree on that part, yeah. The question is that if the chair position is vacant.
Well, what if it's not vacant? It's just the chair is temporarily indisposed. Is that vacant or?
Well, it says temporary vacates or absent. The vice president,
okay.
The vice chair takes over. But
only in presiding.
As the presiding, yes.
Right, but not the other duties.
Right, and that's where we're.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, check this out, because some people have gotten a little pissy with me about this.
Mm-hmm. Where are you looking?
Page 456,
okay.
Line 13. And here you can use chair or president interchangeably. The chair should never be technical or more strict than is necessary for the good of the meeting. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I get a little loosey-goosey, and some people who are just the people who fucking worship Roberts get all, pissy.
Right. Okay, Vice President, 457. In the absence of the President, the Vice President serves in his stead. Thus, it is important to elect a Vice President who is competent to perform the duties of President. Gee.
But that's the duty. So that is everything.
When the Vice President is residing, he or she should be addressed as Mr. or Madam President, unless confusion might result. For example, when the President is also on the platform, in which case the form Mr. or Madam Vice President should be used. Some societies like several Vice Presidents, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. In the case of the resignation or death of the president, the vice president, if there is only one, or the first vice president for more than one, automatically becomes president for an unexpired term, unless the bylaws expressly otherwise provide for the filling of vacancy in the office of the president. The second vice president, yeah.
See, it's saying they do take their duties.
Unless the bylaws say otherwise.
Right, but you were saying they don't take their duties unless the bylaws expressly say they do.
And I would argue that that's the way you're supposed to do it.
But this is saying the opposite.
Yeah.
Okay. That's what was confusing me. So, but this is only not for vacancy. It's only for resignation or death.
Which produces a vacancy by definition.
Well, not a temporary vacancy.
Well, yeah.
In a temporary absence or temporary vacancy, they don't assume all the duties.
Now let's get the terms right here, because I don't consider a temporary absence to be a vacancy.
Neither do I, but they do.
Yeah, and that's where they're getting it. That's where they're getting things mixed up.
It's an absence.
Yeah, absence is not a vacancy. Vacancy says you're done.
You're gone.
Yeah,
right.
You're done. You're gone. Absence says I got to go take a leak.
Or I'm sick for a few weeks or something.
Exactly.
So it seems to me that...
Or I got drafted and I got to do my weekend warrior stuff, whatever.
So it seems to me if it's temporary, they do not take all the duties. They just preside. They hold the fort down.
Right.
But in resignation or death, then it is an automatic succession.
Right.
Unless the bylaws provide otherwise.
And the bylaws as constructed should provide otherwise, because otherwise it reverts back to this.
I think, what do you think about Colorado? I think Colorado's do provide otherwise. It's arguable, because this seems to say that there should be something that specifically mentions the chair, where the Colorado bylaws just talk about vacancies, filling vacancies in general. Right. Does that apply to the chair?
Well, wait a second. Without having to go get the notebook, which is over there.
It just talks about the board being able to appoint vacancies.
Right, but I believe there's a specific clause on the vice chair that says that they perform the chair's duties. I think it says specifically in the absence of the chair.
Right, that would supervise.
I don't think it explicitly says vacancy.
Right. So they wouldn't be an automatic successor.
Right. Which overrides what they're saying here.
Right. We'll have to look at that, but if our memory is correct, then that's correct.
The way I believe it's worded out there is that if a vacancy happens, this is the way I understand it anyway, then until such point as that vacancy is filled,
they serve.
They serve in the absence of the vacancy being filled, but they're presiding without the duties. Once the vacancy is filled, whoever fills the vacancy then assumes the duties and goes from there.
But depending upon what the bylaws say.
Correct. So this is one of those tricky things that may need to be addressed later if we ever get that far.
Yeah, that is. Okay. Well.
So we went down a little bit of a rabbit hole there, but we kind of had to.
Yeah, that's still kind of... All right. Was it you? Yeah, it was you. So
yes, I wrote the. I didn't write the question.
Did you write the question, April? Now that solves a lot of questions. Just got answered.
I didn't write the question. I refuse to admit I wrote the question. I am not April.
He's outing himself.
Do I look like April to you?
I never presume any longer. You can use the ladies' restroom if you'd like.
Favor! Let's hear the opposition side. Like a stubborn donkey's bray. All opposed? You say nay. Opposed! Opposed! The motion carries anyway.